tuning into our session, Psychology and Pop Culture, an Empirical Adventure, which is also the name of our book that we just wrote. So if you're interested in even more details about things that we talk about today, we'll give you a code and you can get a discount and order that. So put a plug in for it.
Or maybe win one.
Or maybe win one. We're going to raffle one off, an autographs book.
An autograph.
Yeah.
Don't you have the book literally
Right here.
Of course you do.
Is it just so you can like stroke it every once in a while?
I'm very proud of the book.
It is his baby, so.
Well, let's tell everybody who we are.
Okay.
I am Dr. Keith Beard. I am a professor at Marshall University and also a clinical psychologist. And beyond that, I also am the director of our doctoral program, which is a clinical psychology program. So I will let the other two introduce themselves.
I'm Dr. April Fugett. I'm also a faculty member at Marshall University. I'm a professor in the psychology department. I'm a cognitive psychologist by training. I am just about as far away from clinical as you can possibly get. So most of the things that we have conversations about today and that they have conversations about, we have a very different levels, which is fun. I think I put the empirical in the title. Not that they're not empirical, but they're a little more applied than I am.
And I am Dr. Britani Black. I am also a clinical psychologist and an instructor for the Marshall School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry.
So before we get into things, I have to bring up the fact that when we present at Comic-Con, I usually am never in pop culture outfits, and we had an agreement that we would all be dressed in pop culture. And so we're going to start by talking about superpowers, and I thought Shazam is great because it's got lots of different superpowers. And nobody else is wearing anything pop culture.
That's okay. We're going to do some costume changes for you during the presentation, and we
got options.
We have options. We have ideas. We're supportive. We
Okay.
have at previous cons very much worn the pop culture, and you were there in your polo yelling at us.
I wanted to wear a tie. You all wouldn't let me wear a tie.
I think my first year you wanted me in heels.
Yeah.
And I was wearing Chucks.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So I think
we've come apparently a long way. They dressed me up in things, but here we are. So, all right. Well, let me give you a little bit of background in what we did and kind of how we do things. With that, we've been studying pop culture and psychology now for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we have several different studies and a few more that we're working on that we'll give you some teasers about as we go along. But we initially wanted to look at personality and superheroes and superpowers. And so we started off looking at what do you like in terms of superheroes and what do you like in terms of superpowers that you wish you had. To look at this in terms of personality, we use the trait approach. And the trait approach just basically says that everybody has certain personality traits. And they're measured on a continuum from low to high. So you could go from being shy to being very outgoing, or being angry to being very calm. And so the mindset with this is that we all are on the spectrum somewhere for all these different traits, and those go together then to make up your personality. We also looked at the Big Five, which is one of the Big Five inventory is a way to measure it. It's one of the theories, a trait theory that looks at things, and it says, surprisingly, because it's Big Five, there are 5 personality traits. The first one is emotional stability. It used to be called neuroticism, and it just looks at how easily upset you are, how much you feel emotions, and so we'll talk about some of that with the results. Another one is extroversion, which of course is how outgoing the person is, and again on a continuum.
which none of us are.
And then
No extroverts here.
We've got openness, which is kind of open to new experiences, and again, how much you're willing to be adventurous and do things versus not. Agreeableness, 2 of us are agreeable, and 1 is not. The agreeableness is very much like the helping field. You want to make a positive difference in the world. sympathy, get along easily with other people, that sort of stuff. And then the last one is conscientiousness, which is very organized to disorganized, again, on that continuum with things. So the very first study we did was to look at superhero preferences. Who do you like and who do you identify with? And that was kind of my initial kind of, hey, April, what do we want to do with this? Our offices are close to each other, and we decided let's do some pop culture stuff. And it kind of went from there and has blown up with things.
It has, and I mean, it led to many interesting conversations.
It led to a book.
It led to many interesting conversations. I mean, Keith has already kind of talked about this approach to personality, but we had whole conversations about the methodology that we wanted to use to measure different kind of psychological phenomenon, and that's kind of, you know, occurred throughout the decade that we've been working together, since we were babies, really.
Since we were babies.
Babies,
Yeah.
small children. Not since she was a small child, though, because you're still a small child.
I was waiting on that.
I know, sorry.
It's okay.
But we've had many different definitions and operational definitions on the way that we wanted to measure things. We've had lots of conversations about those. So, you know, we use non-diagnostic measures, for example, when we are looking at personality. So we're talking about just normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill personality, not like personality disorders or anything like that. Not that I know anything about personality disorders, but we don't measure those kinds of things. And a lot of the things that we have measured, we've had pretty in-depth conversations about how do we want to measure those, and what does that mean in the field of psychology, and what does that mean in pop culture at large as well.
Mm-hmm.
So many conversations.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it started with. Here's the theoretical basis for what we're looking at. The Big Five inventory is how we were initially measuring it, and maybe we can throw up a slide and show you some of our results, and let you see what we found in terms of what people like or dislike in terms of the characters and
Now,
personality traits.
I'm going to also add, interestingly, we had a whole operational definition question about like.
Yeah.
Which pop culture character do you like the most versus which one do you identify with the most? And I study language. That's my primary area of expertise. And I told Keith that I didn't think those things were really different, the characters that you like and the characters that you identify with. And then you had a very different perspective on those. So the first few times that we measured these, we actually measured both. We measured which characters do you like the most, and which ones do you identify with the most. And we didn't find a significant difference between those two things, much to his disappointment.
Because I like certain characters, but I identify more with other characters.
So which character do you like the most?
I like Superman, even though Shazam, but I'm a DC guy, probably more than Marvel with it. But I identify probably more with Lois Lane because of her personality characteristics, her traits, being kind of the go-getter and the spunky and doesn't let anything stand in her way, and kind of outspoken, and you know, I have a few of those traits, and I identify more with that than Superman, who can identify with that. But he's the one I like.
Which character do you like the most?
I'm the opposite of Keith. I'm a Marvel girl, and my favorite would probably be Captain America. But I would
Which Captain America?
Well,
That was a good question, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
that changes by the day, probably for me. Right now, definitely Sam Wilson. I'm a huge fan of the new series. But when we were doing this study, I would have said Chris Evans. So again,
Is any of this a spoiler alert? If it is, we assume if you're Comic-Con watching at home
yes.
that these are not spoilers. So.
But I would not say I identify with Captain America. I would actually probably say I identify more with Kate Bishop, who is from the comics only, in terms of Hawkeye and kind of some of the female characters and the things that she does.
For now.
For now.
What about you?
They're not statistically different. That's
The end.
That's my answer.
So let's throw up a slide, and you all can take a look at some results.
That you liked. That's the key. Like.
Like.
Not identify.
I changed. I just talked about Superman being, the one I like the most. So I thought this will be good. And then we're going to talk about jobs. and superpowers and which jobs and superpowers might go together. And I thought, this looks like a job for Superman. That would be good. And you all aren't wearing anything.
I changed. I have a tank top. I changed.
You're doing all. You are just. Anyway, okay.
I have pop culture on. I have Batman on my wrist.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll work on them a little bit about it because I never with pop culture stuff. But okay, talking about jobs and superheroes. That was kind of one of the next big studies that we did. We wanted to see do people who have certain jobs want certain types of superpowers, or if you like a certain superpower or wish you had a certain superpower, did that then influence what type of job that you picked? And so we used our same personality measures that we've talked about before, but we also used a Holland code test. And the Holland codes are a way to kind of break up, it's a job interest inventory. And there are 6 Holland codes that I'll just mention real quick for you. There's investigative, and these are the people who are helpers, so they kind of cluster people in helping type of jobs. They would be considered investigative. The artistic is, of course, creative types of people. Social, these are the helpers and those types of jobs and careers. Enterprising, these are the persuaders, the leaders, that sort of stuff. And then conventional is very organized, precise, those types of people. And then realistic are very practical, the doers, those types of things. So this study was really interesting to me because, especially being in an academic field, I wanted to see, we're doing career advising with people, we're in a college setting. And so, could I ask them what superpower they wish they have, and then that would then help me figure out how to help them and advise them maybe with a career path with it. And so we looked at several things with that. So do you want to add anything with that before we give some results?
I don't think so.
Yep, I'm good with the results because this one has some pretty interesting ones that I know you're a big fan of talking about.
I am. So why don't we go change again, and we can let you all see some of the interesting things that we found. The next big study that we did had to do with Disney. We added Disney into things, which I'm a big Disney fan. And apparently we were supposed to change again, and one of us did to talk about what we were doing, and...
She added her shield.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And I'm taking the power.
The power. Oh, so we're looking at Disney and love, and... You're lucky I love you all.
We did look at Disney and love, and Disney ruins everything. It is one
Disney
of
does not ruin everything. We're going to talk about love as love and everything.
Disney ruins everything.
See if they're going to make me dress. I'm taking it all the way.
Disney does ruin everything. We added Disney about 3 or 4 years into our research process, and we started collecting data on Disney characters. Obviously, this was Keith's idea. And we added just about any primary Disney kind of animated character that you can think of. We had Peter Pan and Pinocchio and Cinderella and Snow White and Belle and Nemo, and think of one, and we picked them up and we collected data on them, and they completely ruined my results. And if you haven't already gotten the impression with me talking about statistical differences and, being really careful about reliability and validity with our measures and things like that, it really frustrated me when I can only look at so many characters and be very careful to not inflate our top 1 error rate, and to be able to do things like make sure that we maintain, an appropriate level of power. I use things like bond for any corrections. When I add Disney and it overwhelms our top 10, top 20, top 100 list, and it's just Disney.
Took over everything.
It did. I mean, it would be like a Disney character, Spider-Man, Disney character, and then that doesn't even take into account the fact that, is Spider-Man, part of the Marvel universe, and is that Disney?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was actually going to clarify that too. We started this around the time Disney started kind of buying and taking on some of those other corporations, so we're classifying this as classic Disney, not Marvel Disney, Star Wars Disney, Fox even Disney now.
That's a good point. And then we have collected data on a lot of those different characters and a lot of those other kind of pulp culture iconic representations, and those have been parts of different studies. But this was pure Disney that we were adding in this particular study. And we looked at Disney, and I also wanted to look at love. In particular, I wanted to kind of test whether love is love. And so we added a measure for love, and that particular measure breaks love down into 6 big categories. Ludus or Ludos, which is like the game of love, that playing the game of relationships. Eros, which is typically thought of as passionate love. Eros is actually the origin of erotic, if that gives you an idea. Agape, which is unconditional love, and we tend to think about agape as love that a parent would have for a child, but it actually goes beyond that in terms of unconditional love. And a lot of times in religiosity, you see this as a definition of the kind of love that the typical Christian God would have for his people. Mania, which is obsessive love. Storge, familial love or friendship love, and some people actually do define this particular type of love as parental love, and so there is some different definitions there. I'm all about the operational definition. And then pragma, which is just practical love the one you're with, I suppose, is a good way to explain that. And I use statistics to run a MANOVA across this different type of love. We've done this a couple of different times in a couple of different studies. In addition to Disney, we've also studied ships. How much do you like your particular popular relationships out there in fandoms and in fan fiction and things like that? And so we kind of have all of this, and we have these big measures of love for lots of people, and we've done this several times. And unsurprisingly to me, but maybe surprisingly to some people, turns out love is love. There were no significant differences across any of the types of loves for individuals who identify as LGBTQIA+, and those who do not identify as LGBTQIA+. So, love is love. Except, Disney ruins everything.
They do.
And so even though love is love, no matter what your representation of love is, except if you're a Disney fan. And if you're a Disney fan, you love a little harder. And so what you actually...
You all know my Disney fans with me. They know. They know.
And so that was the only difference that we found. And like I said, we've done this study a couple of times now, and with the same results. And we're actually, spoiler alert, collecting some new things now. We're doing a new study, and I'm still asking about love, so we're going to get to test it again. But I've done 2 MANOVAs with this, and it was not statistically significantly different across any of the types of love, either of the times that we've done this. But I like proving the point over and over again that love is love, so here we are.
So why don't we put up a slide, and they can see some of our other results, and you all can finally maybe go change into something pop culture, and then we'll talk about one of our next studies. Well, the next thing that we want to talk about is a study that we did on fandoms, like Star Trek is a fandom, and apparently I've gotten you all to at least, yeah.
You converted.
I converted, yeah. We'd always talk about...
No, we haven't.
We'll talk about the Disney princess versus the Disney villain.
They made me put it on.
Might lighten her up a little bit.
I make Rainbow look good.
So we're talking about fandoms, so... Let's tell you what our studies were with that.
Yeah, so they already have kind of joked that I'm the kid on the panel here. So I have the new guy, and then I have BB-8. So see, I did do something for you. But with our studies, I actually started out as a student. So this is one of the reasons they like to give me a little flack for it. But one of my roles when I first started working and doing the research was actually kind of tracking trends within fandoms and within pop culture.
And making the list.
So
we were the Care Bears for the nostalgia study.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of characters.
So, as they are lovingly reminding me, my initial job was to create the character list that Dr. Beard and Dr. Fugett have been referencing throughout this panel. So I initially did look through Tumblr trends, fanfic trends, and kind of went down the rabbit hole. And
I mentioned that some of the lists are in our book. So if you're interested in what our lists are, you can see them yet again in our book, Pop Culture and our Psychology and Pop Culture, an Empirical Adventure.
A sampling.
A sampling of them, not the whole list.
It'd be a whole book.
It would be a whole book, hundreds and hundreds.
No, yes. So with that, and with kind of getting that role and taking on that role of looking at what was trending on Tumblr year to year, and what was also trending in our research year to year, we started to kind of see trends happening, and we also started to see fandoms, or clusters at least, waxing and waning within our research. So one of the very first ones was Twilight. So we initially had all of the Twilight characters on our list, and we started to see year to year those characters start to just drop and drop and drop until they were no longer really making the top 10, and we're leaning more and more towards the bottom 10, if I'm remembering right, in some instances.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just the Twilight characters that you would think that would maybe be on the bottom 10. Like, the least popular characters are very often villains. One of my favorite ones to talk about is Umbridge. Very often, Umbridge makes the list from Harry Potter. President Snow, although I'm interested to see with the newest book in that series if that alters Snow at all. But also very frequently makes those bottom lists. So you see a lot of villains down there, and so, you know, I would have expected to maybe see a few of the Twilight characters down there. But no, we're talking like Edward.
Yes.
People hated Bella.
People hated Bella a whole lot. I mean, so they had moved to the end of the list. Yeah.
Yes, so what it really was, as the movies were decreasing in popularity, that shift kind of happened, and we became very interested in knowing what was going on with that and why we were seeing that. More recently, we saw that even with Harry Potter, kind of as J.K. Rowling was in the news for some different not so great things. We started to see shifts in how people were responding and how people were representing their love of Harry Potter in our studies. So we already kind of had that going on one hand, and then we had the Disney that April and Keith are kind of referring to, and the way that it dominated the list, and the way that it was so different. We literally were seeing the fans responding differently to those characters and that love of those characters versus some of our other kind of traditional superheroes, supervillains, and things.
Which isn't to say that we don't have some characters who are always on the list. You know, there are some pop culture characters, a lot of them are superheroes, that are so iconic that they do very frequently make the top 10 list from year to year to year. So
Batman.
whether we're talking about, you know, data from 10 years ago or data from last year, we see those similar results over and over again. Interestingly, which we also do talk about and have researched before, very few females.
Yes.
Very few females make that continuous list, and most of the females who do make that list are not in the top 10. They do tend to be in the top 25 or the top 50, and it really does take us that far down to get that kind of female representation. Even further down to get LGBTQIA plus representation, with the exception of our internet research and our shipping research and our anime research. Those areas, in particular, we've been seeing a few more of those shifts in terms of LGBTQIA and female representation.
Yeah, so I think for me personally, that's something I've really loved about our research is we really are paying attention to the shifts, and we really are starting to dive more and more into fandom and what does that mean. You mentioned our internet research. We actually have started looking at internet culture kind of on its own, and not just the fan fiction side of it that we've referenced with our other studies, but we've started looking at YouTube culture and YouTube personalities, for lack of a better word. And with that study, we did see female representation in a way that we have never seen with quote-unquote mainstream media. So the number one person we had at the time that we did the study, Jenna Marbles, she was the most liked of every study we've ever done. The numbers that fans represented for her in particular was higher than Batman, Superman, Skywalkers, etc., from kind of more traditional pop culture media. So with each of these studies, we're really starting to see that fandoms seems to matter, and the idea of fans and their enthusiasm for their specific areas really seems to matter more and more.
Which also brings up some really interesting ideas with that research and the pace with which it moves versus this kind of standard typical research cycle. By the time we collect data, by the time we design an experiment, we go through it, we collect the data, we analyze it, and we have a chance to present it. Lots of things can happen. And so even though our YouTube data is only a couple years old at this point, a lot of the people, I think 4 of our top 10 have been demonetized on YouTube now. And now the conversation would have to be TikTok, right? Like, so are we just doing YouTube? Or are we doing TikTok? Are those the same thing? Are those, kind of different areas? Hint, hint on future research. But it's this kind of idea about what do we include, what do we not include, and how fast can we make those shifts. Yep. Now, we've been pretty fortunate that our shifts are a little bit faster because of the platforms that we use to collect data. We actually collect our data. One of our avenues is with social media, and so we can actually push that out pretty quickly. I will put down a plug here that all of our research is Office of Research Integrity, or IRB, approved before we ever collect the first piece of data. So I will make sure to be clear on that. So even though we're fast, we are doing everything appropriately. It is real research with real reliable and valid measures, and we are going through all of the appropriate channels to collect them.
Yes, and speaking of measures, we've even added in recently with fandoms a new measure and are constantly kind of changing that. So looking at what is it about fandoms that are important, be it the enthusiasm, be it the engagement that you have with the media, and as well as the social aspect, because we are really seeing more and more of a social aspect with fandom through social media and through people talking in the last year in particular.
Okay, well, maybe we could put a slide up and show you all again some of the results with it. And maybe you all will finally, come on people, wear some pop culture stuff for me. Well, we'll see. So. I gave up, people. I wore just a regular polo like I normally might do if we were presenting with it, with a little exception, but we'll get to that.
So our favorite part of any Comic-Con experience is actually our humans, you, the people that come and ask us amazing and interesting questions and make us go, ooh, I didn't think about that, and then really wish that we had thought about that, and maybe like 2 years ago. And then, so we wanted to kind of replicate that experience, so we invited some of our humans, our former minions, to ask us some questions in your place, and then hopefully we could all be together in San Diego or in a non-virtual environment safely soon. So let's hear from a few of our former minions who have worked with us and see what they have to ask us.
I was wondering, what do you think comes first? Do somebody's interest in certain superpowers or wanting that superpower, does that lead to the job interest? Or does somebody's career choice result in them wanting specific superpowers?
That's a good question, and we actually looked at that initially because we weren't sure which direction we wanted to go with it or what we would find. And actually, the way we went with it was, because like I said before, working in an academic setting, we wanted to see, hey, can I see what superpower you want and how that would then lead into a career choice with that. And we kind of got some different results, I think, right?
We did, yeah.
Depending on which way we looked at it. So that was kind of interesting as well.
I also like, can we just say, nice shirt, Dr. Carter?
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of our former students who is now an alum and a doctor. So.
I'm wondering if you think whether maybe the superpower somebody wants will change the way they approach their job and the way they accomplish tasks, or vice versa. Again, if the way somebody accomplishes tasks in their job or whatever they need to accomplish is going to determine what superpowers they want.
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, you're the Holland Code expert.
That's all you, dear.
Yeah, I think that there is some influence. I mean, there's the whole reason that we like certain superpowers or kind of wish we have certain superpowers, leads us into kind of maybe making career choices. And
So, Dr. Clinician, what superpower do you wish you had?
I actually would like to move things with my mind, with it all. And so I think in terms of me being a clinician with it, I try to move people from this problem to that problem with my mind with it. And so I think it kind of goes along those same lines. You're being cynical with it all.
I think it's just
There
because
you go.
I think it's just because you like control.
Maybe just a little bit.
And
A little
you,
bit.
Dr. Clinician, ma'am?
I usually say time travel. I don't know. I'm a big history nerd, and that's always just been something I've loved.
Are you going to try to relate that to your career, or are you just going to learn from the lesson?
I'm learning the lesson.
She can go back in time and fix people's problems before they come, and our past influences our future and our present.
He said it,
Just
not
saying.
me.
Just saying.
Just throwing that out there, not me.
Gotcha.
Next question.
Psychological studies have found a connection between the big five personality traits and some symptoms of mental illness. Is it possible that our experiences with mental illness could influence which characters we prefer, as we may relate to a character more if we share a similar experience?
I think this is kind of exactly what we talked about a little while ago in our presentation when we looked at that identify, but we also looked at like, and we didn't really see a big difference there. I think for me personally, I can't see, and I'm the one that's kind of argued that they would be the same all along. I think that maybe the things that we identify with and the things that we like, even though we don't overtly say that those are the same thing, I think implicitly we're biased into those same things, so that you identify with a character, maybe you don't like that character as much because you identify with that character, and we don't always love ourselves as much as we should, and we definitely see our flaws, and so maybe it looks a little bit different if you ask someone, but in the long run, when you kind of look at the aggregate data, it doesn't make a big difference, I don't think.
Let's go to the next question.
In your book, you mentioned that there wasn't a significant difference in the characters we like and those we identify with. So this is a bit of a personal question. Which characters do you like? Which do you identify with? And are those one and the same?
I think I kind of already talked about that in terms of liking Superman and then liking the traits that Lois Lane has. So they're not one and the same.
They're the same for me. I like Rogue. I identify with Rogue. I would like Rogue's superpowers. Not just because I can kill people with them either, but I would get to keep all of the superpowers. It's kind of like wishing for more wishes.
Why do I think it's more like she wants to suck the life out of people?
He said it, not me.
Let's
I
break
work
this.
with her.
We'll break this up and just go ahead to the next question now.
So the results of your study on superhero preference and personality made me think about values. Do you think that there could be a relationship between what values we have and the superheroes we prefer?
It's definitely an area that we're interested in studying. We have expanded in the last few years, probably 4 years actually, into looking at beliefs and values, and we have done a couple studies in the last 2 years, specifically one dealing with politics and another one dealing with the idea of religiosity that that we're hoping to get to share soonish.
Yes.
Soonish, we have data. Some of it we've already talked about in other places. Disney Boy over here also made us collect data on Christmas. So, yeah, we definitely think there's more to explore there in terms of values. And of course, it's Kasey with the hard-hitting future direction questions.
One of our graduate students.
Hi guys, so I had a question about the increase of LGBTQIA plus ships from the 2018 study to the 2020 study. And so I guess my main question is, what do you think could be driving that? Do you think that maybe it was the increase in available options for people to rank as to who they would ship? Or do you think that maybe it points to something bigger like more of a normalization, or that LGBTQIA plus relationships are becoming a little more mainstream in our pop culture?
That's another interesting question from, again, one of our graduate students, Jake Bass. Yeah, I think that there have been changes in representation of LGBTQIA plus characters and the popularity in them and the acceptance of them. I think there's a long way to go yet still with that. But I think the changes that we have seen have been because of changes within the media and kind of a push for more representation and the need for that.
I will also say, I will add, that we actually have more representation in our participants. When we first started collecting our data for our studies, we had about 2% of our population identifying as LGBTQIA+. And
Only 2.
Yeah. And now we're up to about 15 to 20%, depending on the survey. Part of that is definitely an artifact of who's interested in completing our studies and where we're collecting data on social media and things like that. But it is an exciting development for us, especially as we've been studying things like Love is Love.
So let's go to the next question.
Do you agree or disagree on the findings based on the personality traits in assorted houses when you compare them to those who you know personally?
So I think that's in reference to our Harry Potter study. Not my favorite study that we've done for a variety of reasons. But no, I don't find that much disparity between what our results kind of say and what people that we know have identified in terms of houses. But I know that person, and it's a little bit like reading a horoscope, right? Like you can read any horoscope and see parts of it that fit you, and so I can, see her take a survey and then be like, she's a Ravenclaw, and I can see those Ravenclaw components. But if she told me she were a Hufflepuff, I could be like, oh, I could totally see that. Or if she told me that she was, a Gryffindor, I can absolutely see that as well. Maybe Slytherin a little less for both of the two of you, although don't let Beard fool you. He definitely has some Slytherin in there.
You would know. Slytherin Queen. All right, let's go to the next question.
Looking back, is there anything you wish you would have done differently about this study?
Not done it. No. Our Harry Potter study.
But then we wouldn't have a book.
We would still have a book. It just
we wouldn't have that particular section.
No, and it's a really good question. Harry Potter is one of the first big fandoms that we've studied, and I'm going to go ahead and say that it's another one of those fandoms that we've seen big shifts with. So we've seen really high popularity and then really low popularity with it. And, of course, that does things to my numbers. It's a little bit like Disney, right? It kind of messes with things, and it changes the trends over time, which, of course, are interesting to study, the trends over time and things like that. But for me, Harry Potter in particular has been interesting because in the very first study in the book, the very first study that we did together, we had a list queen.
I knew that was coming.
We had a list queen.
We can't go one presentation without this. One.
We had a list queen, and the list queen forgot someone on our very first list. And Dr. Beard, who was that?
Harry Potter.
And so
every other Harry Potter character was on the list, but not Harry Potter.
So I have a love-hate relationship with Harry Potter and our results. But I really appreciate Kasey Kessler, one of our graduate students and former minions, in asking the question and working with us on that particular project. And, of course, fandoms are a lot of fun to study. We have a lot of fandoms that I have very mixed feelings about, and some of them are probably pretty shocking to most fans. And I'm a fan, but that doesn't change me getting mad when they mess up my data.
Very much so. And I think fandoms, people kind of jump in and out of different fandoms. So the first fandom that I had when we first started this is not the fandom I identify with now at this time. So there's always those shifts and those changes that are happening.
Okay, let's do the next question.
Were you surprised by the findings that Umbridge was the most least liked character and Voldemort didn't even make the top 10?
No.
I look at that, we've all had that teacher who has been like Umbridge. And so I think people can relate to that, and that's probably part of why they dislike her more. We all haven't had a Voldemort with it, but we've all had an Umbridge.
And also kind of piggybacking on that a little bit too, when you look again at the fan side of it and fandoms, for almost generations at this point, people have hated Umbridge in a very different way and really villainized her in a different way than Voldemort even at times, in terms of the fandom and the fan side of things.
So that should wrap everything up for us. We appreciate you watching our video, and we will be putting a slide up that will have a link and a QR code for you to enter a raffle to win a signed copy of our book that we will send out to you. And so hopefully in the future we'll get to see you all in person, and happy con. Bye everybody.